Today we're going to talk about some things related to fat loss and that are powerful for fat loss that I'm guessing most of you have never heard about before. Most people struggle to lose weight generally, but most people especially struggle to lose body fat, or what we call adipose tissue. We're going to talk about all sorts of aspects of fat loss that are governed by your nervous system. And this is, I think, an important gap that's missing in the discussion about fat loss. Remember, your nervous system, which includes your brain and your spinal cord and all the connections that they make with the organs of the body, governs everything. If you ingest about as many calories as you burn, you maintain weight, typically. And if you ingest fewer calories than you burn, typically you'll lose weight. That's the kind of rule of fat loss. Calories in versus calories out, meaning how many calories you ingest versus how many calories you burn, is the fundamental and most important formula in this business of fat loss and weight management in general. If you ingest fewer calories than you burn, that you will lose weight, and that a significant portion of that will come from body fat. But the calories burned portion is strongly influenced by a number of things that you can control that can greatly accelerate or increase the amount of adipose tissue, or the proportion of adipose tissue that you burn in response to exercise and food. We're going to break down that process into two important steps. And if you can understand those two important steps, then the rest of the tools will be very straightforward to understand and manage. However, there are a couple items that you should make sure you're getting correctly. And if you're not perfect about these, don't worry about it. Most people are not perfect about them. I'm certainly not perfect about them. But we should all be striving to get quality and sufficient sleep. Get your sleep right. Get your light exposure right. Avoid bright light in your eyes at times you want to be asleep, and get bright light in your eyes at times you want to be awake. The other thing is essential fatty acids. We need fatty acids. They are vital to so many aspects of our health. You don't have to get them from supplements. You can if you want to, but you need to get them from your food. They are essential. The key thing is to get the levels of EPA that you ingest above 1,000 milligrams per day. So that doesn't mean just taking 1,000 milligrams or more of, say, fish oil or krill oil or whatever your preferred source is. It means getting above 1,000 milligrams of EPA. But the research in the literature shows that you want to get above 1,000 milligrams of EPA per day, because that's when you can best support your metabolism and position yourself for good fat loss. And then finally, you can't really position yourself to have a strong metabolism if your iodine levels aren't correct and your thyroid levels aren't correct. You can overdo iodine, so you don't want to do that. Get your gut microbiome right. That does not necessarily mean you need to ingest probiotics. You can if you want to, but you can also just simply ingest a serving or two of fermented foods per day. So again, sleep, sufficient EPAs, glutamine if you have issues with leaky gut or sugar cravings can really help. How we think about a given set of activities affects how we perform those activities, and how we think and about and perform those activities has a real effect on our physiology. The burn factor, your thermogenic environment, is one of the, if not the most important factors in this business of fat loss. So let's talk about fat utilization. Let's talk about how fat is converted into energy, which is sometimes also called fat burning. There's two parts to this process. One is fat mobilization, and the second is fat oxidation or utilization. Stored fat has two parts that are relevant here. It's got the fatty acid part, and that's the part that your body can use, and that's attached to something called glycerol, and they're linked by a backbone. So if you just can remember, to mobilize fat, you got to break the backbone between glycerol and these fatty acids, okay? That's accomplished by an enzyme called lipase, but you can forget all that if you want. Remember, we're just trying to mobilize fat. And that second part, remember, first part is mobilization, the second part is oxidation, is then those fatty acids, those are potential fuel. They're just potential fuel, but you haven't burned the fat yet. You've just moved it out of your fat cells. They're going to go into cells that can use them for energy. So just to really zoom out again to make sure I don't lose anybody, you got to mobilize the fat, then you have to oxidize the fat. You have to, in other words, you have to mobilize it, then you actually have to convert it into energy. So you have two opportunities to burn more fat. And both of those opportunities are governed by your nervous system. So let's talk about movement and the more traditional kinds of movement, aka exercise, that has been shown to lead to increases in metabolism and fat loss to greater degrees depending on whether or not, for instance, you're fasted when you do it or not. Different types of exercise engage the musculature of the body and the heart and the lungs in different ways, and can have vastly different effects on things like hormones and metabolism, depending on whether or not it's of high intensity, moderate intensity, or low intensity. Sprint interval training was defined as all out, greater than 100% of VO2 max bursts of activity that last 8 to 30 seconds. So that would be SIT. HIIT, H-I-I-T, is defined as submaximal, so 80 to 100% of VO2 max bursts of activity that last 60 to 240 seconds. Moderate intensity continuous training is steady state cardio, sometimes called zone 2 cardio these days on the internet, which is performed continuously for 20 to 60 minutes at moderate intensity of 40 to 60% of VO2 max. However, the types of exercise, whether or not it was medium intensity or high intensity or low intensity, is all over the map for these studies, so it's very hard to target an ideal protocol. If you want to burn more body fat, exercise intensely for 20 to 60 minutes. The higher the intensity, obviously, the shorter that bout is going to be, and then move over into zone 2 cardio. High intensity burns more glycogen during the activity, more body fat afterwards. Moderate to low intensity burns more, percentage-wise, more body fat is oxidized than glycogen during the actual exercise. Afterward, it's more glycogen. Moderate and high intensity training followed by low intensity training, or even just followed by going back into life, is going to be the best way to continue to burn body fat because of the ways that it increases basal metabolic rate. So, train moderately to intensely, to very high intensity, and then moderate to low intensity. Or train moderate to high intensity and then go about life. So now I want to turn our attention to compounds that increase epinephrine and adrenaline, as well as compounds that work outside the adrenaline epinephrine pathway to increase the rates of fat loss. There are things that people can ingest that will allow them to oxidize more fat. And that occurs mainly by increasing the amount of epinephrine that is released from neurons that innervate fat tissue. It's well established that caffeine can enhance performance if you're caffeine adapted. There's this kind of interesting phenomenon where ingestion of caffeine serves more as a performance enhancer, both by increasing alertness, but also by way of dilating vasculature, of allowing more blood flow. Caffeine can enhance the amount of fat that you burn in any duration of exercise, and it can shift the percentage of fat that you oxidize compared to glycogen. If caffeine is the kind of the entry point for most people of using compounds to increase the rate or percentage of fat loss in exercise and even at rest, what are some of the other things that are useful and interesting? I've talked before about something called GLP-1. This is something that can be triggered by the ingestion of yerba mate, which is a tea. Mate increases GLP-1. GLP-1 is in the glucagon pathway. Glucagon facilitates that process through increases in GLP-1. The short takeaway is mate increases GLP-1 and, yes, increases the percentage of fat that you'll burn. It increases fat burning. So if you want to burn more fat, drinking mate before exercise is good. Semaglutide, but that's not the way you pronounce it, but semaglutide is the way that it's been described on the internet. In any case, this compound increases GLP-1. It's actually a GLP-1 analog in some cases, and they go by various types of trade names. I hope you found this conversation interesting, both for sake of understanding fat loss and how to lose fat more quickly and to lose more of it, if that's your goal, as well as simply to understand the biology of fat metabolism from a different perspective, from the perspective of the nervous system.
What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world but keep the sky on your mind. Fly.